My name is Eden Voss. I am 35 years old, and my brothers locked me out of our father's trust meeting because they said I had chosen paperwork over family. They did not know that for 4 years, every private loan keeping their construction company alive had been quietly assigned to my firm. When the trustee asked who owned the debt, both of them looked at me for the first time all morning. The meeting was at 9 a.m. in a law office that smelled like coffee, polished wood, and money pretending not to panic. Voss Construction had used the same firm for 30 years. Ralston, Vale, and Keene. My father used to say the name like it was a vault. If something was inside that office, he believed it was protected from weather, lawsuits, bad luck, and daughters who asked too many questions. I arrived at 8:47 with a navy folder under my arm. My brothers were already there. Callum stood near the reception desk in a charcoal suit, scrolling through his phone with the studied boredom of a man who wanted everyone to know he had somewhere more important to be. My younger brother, Reed, sat with one ankle over his knee, tapping a pen against his watch. Their wives sat together on the leather sofa, whispering behind perfect hair. When Callum saw me, he did not smile. "Eden," he said, "this is a trustee meeting." "I know." "For active family stakeholders." I looked at the frosted glass door behind him. "Dad's trust names all 3 children." Reed laughed without looking up. "Dad named you because Mom made him. Everybody knows you walked away." Walked away. That was the phrase my family had used for 12 years. I walked away from the company. I walked away from Dad. I walked away from the family name. Nobody said I walked away after finding 2 sets of books in the old payroll cabinet. Nobody said I walked away after Dad told me to sign off on equipment valuations I knew were inflated. Nobody said I walked away because my brothers wanted me to clean numbers they had already dirtied. They preferred the version where I was cold. "I am here for the trust meeting," I said. Callum stepped between me and the hallway. "No, you are here to make some point." "The point is scheduled for 9. Reed finally looked up. "Listen to yourself. This is why Dad stopped trusting you." That landed. I wish it had not, but it did. My father, Grant Voss, had been a difficult man to love and an impossible man to impress. He built Voss Construction from 2 dump trucks and a rented office trailer. By the time I was 16, the company had highway contracts, concrete crews, a crane yard, and a reputation for finishing ugly jobs on time. Callum learned to charm clients. Reed learned to charm inspectors. I learned the books. Not because anyone invited me, because Dad thought numbers were secret weapons and forgot that children listen near doorways. By 21, I could read a job cost report faster than Callum could read a room. By 24, I had found enough soft fraud to understand why my father never let outside accountants stay long. At 26, I refused to sign an internal valuation package. Dad called me disloyal. Callum called me dramatic. Reed called me a liability. So I left and joined a distressed assets firm 2 cities over, where nobody cared if I was pleasant as long as I could find risk hiding under pretty collateral. My father did not speak to me for 3 years. Then he called, not to apologize, to ask a question. If a company has assets but no liquidity, what does the lender really own? I was standing in a grocery store aisle holding a bag of rice. "Depends on the loan documents," he grunted. Still answering like a lawyer. Still asking like a man in trouble. He hung up. That was my father. Half confession, half insult. No goodbye. 6 months later, Voss Construction's private notes started appearing through brokers, equipment financing, bridge loans, a revolving credit line backed by receivables, a second position lien on the crane yard. Small pieces at first, sold at discounts by lenders who wanted out quietly. My firm bought the first note because it was underpriced. I bought the second because I recognized the collateral. By the third, I understood the pattern. My brothers were using my father's name, old relationships, and family pride to keep a business standing upright long after the foundation cracked. Dad had either allowed it or been too sick to stop it. I did not call the debt. I did not gloat. I built a file. 4 years of assignments, UCC filings, lien schedules, default notices held in reserve, and correspondence. Every document clean, every purchase legal, every signature outside my family. When Dad died in April, Callum sent me one text. "Service is Friday. No scene." I went. I sat in the 3rd row. I watched my brothers stand beside the casket and talk about legacy as if legacy had not been refinanced at 14%. 2 weeks later, the trust meeting was scheduled. Now I stood in the law office reception area while Callum blocked the hall and told me I did not belong. The receptionist looked terrified in the polite way receptionists do when wealthy families become weather events. At 8:59, Mr. Keene opened the conference room door. He was older than I remembered, thin and careful, with silver hair and a dark green tie. "Ms. Voss," he said to me. "Good, you are here." Callum's jaw tightened. "Arthur," he said, using the lawyer's first name like a weapon. "We agreed this meeting would be limited." Mr. Keene looked at him. "No, you requested that. I did not agree." Reed stood. "She has no operational role." "The trust does not require operational affection," Mr. Keene said. "It requires notice to beneficiaries." I almost smiled. We entered the conference room. Callum and Reed took the chairs nearest the head of the table. Their wives sat behind them. I sat opposite, folder on my lap. No one offered coffee. That was fine. My hands were steady enough without it. Mr. Keene opened with the trust summary. My father had left voting control of Voss Construction to Callum and Reed equally. The family house would be sold and proceeds divided. The lake cabin would go to Reed, the old office building to Callum. A small cash account was split 3 ways, smaller than anyone expected. My name appeared in one paragraph. Eden Voss shall receive no management interest in Voss Construction, but shall remain a residual beneficiary after debt settlement and asset reconciliation. Callum leaned back. "Residual," he said softly. Reed smirked. "Sounds right." I looked at Mr. Keene. He did not look at me yet. "Before distributions," he continued, "the trustee is required to reconcile secured obligations against trust assets and related company collateral." Callum waved a hand. "Company debt is operational. Reed and I will handle it." "Not if it attaches to trust assets." Reed frowned. "What does that mean?" Mr. Keene opened a second folder. "It means the crane yard lien, the receivables line, the equipment notes, and the office building bridge loan must be acknowledged before transfer." Callum's face changed by one shade. I had seen that look in debtor meetings. Not fear yet. Recognition. "Those are normal business instruments," he said. "Perhaps," Mr. Keene replied. "The issue is ownership." Reed laughed. "Ownership? We owe banks." Mr. Keene looked down at the papers. "No, you owed banks. The notes were assigned." The room went quiet. Callum reached for the folder. "Assigned to who?" Mr. Keene looked at me then. So did everyone else. I set my Navy folder on the table and opened it. "Most of them are held by Northbridge Recovery Partners," I said. "My firm." Reed stared. "That is not possible." "It is recorded," Callum's wife whispered. "Callum?" I slid the first assignment across the table, then the second, then the third. Equipment note, August 2022. Crane yard lien, March 2023. Receivables line, December 2023. Office bridge loan, May 2024. Supplier settlement note, February this year. Reed stood so quickly his chair hit the wall. "You bought our debt?" "No," I said. "I bought available debt attached to distressed collateral. You made it available." Callum grabbed the crane yard document. "This is family." "No, this is a UCC filing." The sentence landed harder than I expected. Mr. Keene adjusted his glasses. "The assignments appear valid. I have verified the records." Reed turned on him. "You knew." "I became aware during trust reconciliation." "And you did not tell us?" "I am telling you now." Callum looked at me as if I had broken into his house. "You sat through Dad's funeral knowing this?" "I sat through Dad's funeral hearing you call the company debt-free. You should have come to us." "When? Before or after you locked me out of the meeting?" His mouth shut. That was the first small victory, not the debt, the silence. Mr. Keene continued, "Because lawyers are useful when family drama needs a spine. The trustee cannot distribute certain assets until Northbridge confirms its position." Reed looked sick. "What position?" I folded my hands. "I am not calling everything due today." Callum laughed bitterly. "Generous." "Strategic," I said. "Voss Construction can survive if it stops pretending. Debt for equity conversion, outside audit, sale of the lake cabin and office building to pay down secured obligations. Independent controller, no family distributions for 18 months. Reed exploded. You think you can walk back in and run Dad's company? No, I think I can prevent you from driving it through a wall while calling it legacy. You abandoned it. I looked at him. I refused to lie for it. For the first time that morning, my father's absence felt like a person in the room. Not the man from the funeral stories, the real one. Proud, frightened, brilliant, and willing to bend truth until someone else had to pay for it. Callum lowered his voice. What do you want? It was the right question 4 years late. An audit, I said. A restructuring. And written acknowledgement that I was not disloyal for seeing the numbers before you did. Reed scoffed. You want an apology and a loan workout? I want the record corrected. Mr. Keene's pen paused. Callum looked down at the documents. His hands were not shaking, but the swagger had drained out of them. If we refuse? Then Northbridge enforces its rights. Crane Yard first. Receivables second. Supplier note third. The company survives on paper for maybe 60 days. You would destroy Dad's company? No, I said. I am giving you the first honest chance it has had in years. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Their lawyers joined by phone, then in person, then quietly because documents have a way of lowering voices. Reed accused me of revenge 12 times. Callum stopped after the second hour and started asking real questions. How much cash was needed? Which assets were most exposed? Could the company keep current jobs? Would layoffs be necessary? Those were the questions he should have asked when Dad was alive. But late math is better than no math. By 12:41, we had a term sheet. Not final, not friendly, real. I signed for Northbridge. Callum and Reed signed as company officers. Mr. Keene witnessed. Their wives did not speak. As we stood to leave, Reed looked at me. Dad would hate this. I picked up my folder. Dad built a company. You built a myth. I am saving the first one. Outside the law office, the morning had turned into rain. Callum followed me to the elevator. Eden, I turned. He looked older than he had at 8:47. Did Dad know? That I owned the notes? Yes, some of them. His face tightened. What did he say? I thought about the grocery store call. The way Dad had asked what a lender really owned. The way he hung up before he had to hear the answer. He asked the right question, I said. He did not like the answer. Callum nodded slowly. For the first time in years, he looked less like my father's successor and more like my brother. The restructuring did not fix us quickly. Reed avoided me for months. Callum sent emails with attachments and no greetings. The audit found exactly what I feared. Inflated equipment values, unpaid payroll taxes hidden through timing, vendor debts rolled into personal guarantees, and one-side agreement with a supplier that nearly became criminal. We cleaned what we could. We sold the lake cabin. Reed cried at the closing and blamed me until the tax lien was released. Then he stopped mentioning it. The company survived smaller. That mattered. The first time I walked back into the old office, the receptionist still had my employee photo in a drawer. She said my father never let her throw it out. I did not know what to do with that. I put the photo in my folder beside the debt assignments. Not everything you keep is evidence against someone. Some papers are evidence that the story was always more complicated. 1 year after the trust meeting, Voss Construction made its first clean quarterly report in a decade. No hidden notes, no fake margins, no family distributions. Just revenue, costs, debt service, and a modest profit. Callum sent the report with 2 words. You were right. I printed it. Not because I needed to win again, because sometimes the correction is the inheritance. There was another correction that mattered more than the quarterly report. It came in a cardboard banker box from the old records room. During the restructuring, we hired an outside controller named Sandra Vale. She was 61, wore square glasses, and could make grown men confess to sloppy bookkeeping by asking where they kept their stapler. She did not care about Voss history. She did not care that Callum had a framed photo of Dad shaking hands with a governor. She cared about source documents. On her 4th week, Sandra called me. I found a file with your name on it. What kind of file? Old internal correspondence. Grant Voss kept it in a locked drawer. I drove to the office that afternoon. The drawer was in Dad's old desk, the one nobody wanted to empty because emptying a dead man's desk feels like admitting he is not coming back to ask for his pen. Inside was a folder labeled EV in my father's handwriting. I expected warnings. I expected proof that he had blamed me until the end. Instead, the first page was a memo from 12 years earlier, the year I left. Eden flagged unsupported equipment values in bid package 14C. Review needed before lender submission. Under it, Dad had written one sentence. She is right, but the boys will not hear it from her. I sat in his office with that paper in my hand until the window went dark. Callum found me there. What is that? I handed him the memo. He read it twice. Then he sat down in the chair across from the desk like his knees had negotiated without him. He never said that. No. He told me you were making trouble. He told me I was making trouble too. Callum rubbed his face. Why would he write it and not say it? I looked around the office. The awards, the model crane, the framed news articles, the family photograph where Dad stood in the middle with one hand on each son's shoulder while I stood beside my mother, half a person away from the company. Because admitting I was right meant admitting he had taught you wrong. Callum did not answer. We kept reading. There were 7 memos in that folder. Not affectionate, not apologetic. My father was allergic to anything that looked like softness on paper. But the file showed that he knew. He knew when I refused to sign the inflated valuations. He knew when Reed booked personal fuel through job costs. He knew when Callum pushed a supplier note past the line of good faith. He knew I was not hysterical, bitter, or disloyal. He had simply chosen silence because silence protected the structure he understood. I had spent years wanting a clean answer. Either my father believed them, or he believed me. Either he loved the company, or he loved the truth. Either he rejected me, or he misunderstood. The file said the truth was uglier. He understood. He still let me carry the blame. Callum copied every memo for the audit record. I asked for one copy for myself. Reed did not. When he read the memos, he threw the folder across the conference room. So now Dad is the villain too? No, I said. He is a man who made choices. You just need everyone to be guilty except you. I was tired by then. Not angry. Tired in the bone-deep way that comes after you realize the fight is older than the people in the room. Reed, guilt is not a family heirloom. You can put it down anytime you want. He stared at me like I had spoken in another language. The turning point with Reed did not happen in a conference room. It happened at a supplier's warehouse 6 weeks later. We were renegotiating with Mayfield Steel, one of the vendors my brothers had stretched until courtesy became risk. Mayfield's owner, a woman named June Harrow, had known my father for 20 years and did not like me on principle because she believed lenders were undertakers with calculators. She told me that to my face. You people arrive when trust is already dead, I said, usually. Reed smirked, thinking she had won something. Then June opened her ledger. Your company owes me $486,000. I paid my crew out of reserve twice because Grant promised me Voss always made good. Reed looked at the floor. I slid our proposed payment schedule across the table. We can pay 80 today, 120 over 90 days, and convert the balance into secured vendor terms tied to 3 active receivables. If we miss, you get direct assignment on those receivables. June read it. This is not enough. It is what keeps the company alive and gives you more than a lawsuit would. She looked at Reed. Did she write this? He did not answer. I said, yes. June tapped the page. Your father never brought me a plan. He brought me stories. That sentence hit Reed harder than anything I had said. He had built his adult life on Dad's stories. The heroic bid, the handshake agreement, the client who would pay next Friday, the rich man who was only broke on paper. Hearing a vendor strip that language down to what it had cost her changed the air around him. In the parking lot, Reed stopped beside my car. I did not know Mayfield was that bad. You signed 2 extensions. Callum handled the cash. You signed. He flinched. It was small, but it was the first time I saw the accusation land as fact instead of insult. I thought signing meant I believed in the company. Sometimes signing means you become responsible for what you did not read. He nodded once, and for once he did not argue. Callum chose work. He came in early, left late, and learned to ask Sandra questions without acting insulted by answers. He apologized to the payroll manager for years of making emergencies feel like her fault. He called me one night at 10:18 to ask how a lien waiver really worked, and when I explained, he said, Dad should have made us learn this. Yes, I said. You tried. Yes. I am sorry. It was not dramatic. No music, no tears. Just a tired man in an office, finally making a sentence stand upright. Reed chose resentment first, then boredom with resentment. That sounds small, but it mattered. He stopped performing anger for employees. He stopped calling me the banker in a tone that made it sound like a disease. He took over equipment maintenance because it gave him something real to fix. As for me, I chose distance. That surprised them more than the debt ownership. Callum assumed that if I wanted the record corrected, I wanted the family seat back. Reed assumed I wanted to make him report to me forever. My mother, who had watched all of this from a quiet grief that made her voice smaller, asked if I would move back to town. I said no. But the company needs you, she said. The company needs systems. Your brothers need you. My brothers need consequences and a controller. She smiled sadly at that. I visit once a month for the oversight meeting. I do not take calls after 8 unless something is on fire, and I mean that literally, because construction companies sometimes make metaphors inconvenient. I do not attend family dinners where business will be discussed without an agenda. I do not let anyone call me cold for having boundaries. Cold is what they named the wall after they spent years throwing things at it. The Navy folder from the trust meeting sits in my home office now. I added Dad's memo to it. Not at the front, at the back. The first page is still the assignment schedule. That is the page that saved the company. The memo is the page that saved something in me. I used to think I needed my family to admit I had not betrayed them. Now I know the record can hold a truth long before people grow brave enough to speak it. That is my story. My brothers locked me out because they thought the will was the whole truth. The debt records told the rest. If your family calls you disloyal for reading the fine print, remember this. The paper trail does not care who was loudest at the table. It only remembers who signed, who borrowed, and who finally told the truth.